Okay, so this is for the protostomes video project for Biology 112. And the organism that I decided to do was the crayfish, otherwise known as Procambris clarkii. So for the crayfish, the natural habitat of these, according to the marine invasions research going on at CERC, the natural habitat of these crayfish is more often than not marshes and swamps, or on certain occasions things like slow-moving rivers. And they have a very high tolerancy for hypoxic conditions or things that have like really poor water quality or high salinities. Basically just meaning like they can live in highly concentrated salt water. Um, and in a lot of these ecosystems that they come into, they can have a lot of negative ecological impacts, because they can tend to be very competitive with the crayfish that are already in the habitats that they come into. And they also have the ability to alter those natural habitats, because they are an invasive species. So how they get their food, so for the red swamp crayfish specifically, it is very easy for them to dominate things like lakes and ponds and rivers, and in the different wetlands that they inhabit. They are more commonly herbivores, so feeding on plants and different things like that. And then in some cases, they can be carnivores, feeding on things like snails or fish or even things like frogs or other amphibians. And in that sense, again, because they are invasive, they are a lot of times competing with the other native crayfish to the environment that they've come into. So next is their predator-prey relationship. So according to the Geological Survey in the United States, these crayfish have been shown to reduce macrophyte density through the feeding that they do. And through their selective consumption, that is the other way that they reduce macrophyte diversity. And then these species feed on a variety of things, on a variety of biota, and that includes things like water fleas, insects, and other crayfish. So this means that they are carnivorous in that sense. Um, and again, because they kind of infiltrate these different species and these different ecosystems, they can endanger a lot of the already native species that are there. So whether it be other animals or other plant organisms, that can cause major disruptions in the ecosystem that they decide to infiltrate. So some of the unique evolved traits specifically for these crayfish. Um, the biggest thing for the females is that they can carry up to 500 of their eggs underneath their tail. So this allows them to spread very quickly, and a lot of the times over greater distances in their ecosystem, just because the eggs can be spread as the female is swimming and moving to a new location. So it's a quick spread, but also it's a very vast spread as we see in the distance in which they cover. And additionally, the things for them, like the raised bumps, these are a very easy thing for them to be identified. So when different scientists are coming through to look at the ecosystem and see what kind of species are here, they're able to identify specifically the red swamp crayfish very easily because of the raised bumps that they have uh, prominent over the body and claws. And their colors are more often than not bright red, but they can also appear in either white or black. So on the tree of life, they are considered an invasive species. Again, this goes back to some of the other topics that we were talking about, in that they prey a lot on the already native species that are there in their habitats. And this can cause a lot of disruption to the native species and the native makeup of the ecosystem that they're in. And for that reason, that's why they're considered an invasive species. And here's just some pictures that I found. Again, here's the prominent bumps here on the claws, and then you can see part of the body here. And then underneath over here, you can start to see some of the eggs. And again, this is where we get that vast spread of the species. And not just the population is a very big population, but it's spread out over large distances. And so lastly, their importance to the ecosystem, although it is a negative impact, it is still a very important impact. And for their species, they're very good colonizers, going back to talking about the females and their egg production. Um, and because of that egg production and the colonization aspects that they have, they are able to quickly establish themselves in any ecosystem that they decide to inhabit. Um, and because of that, the impacts of the native crayfish that are there, it can lead to things like crayfish plague. Obviously, we talked about the reduction of macrophytes, and not only their assemblages, but their diversity as well. And they can also do things like alter the water quality, and the sediment characteristics in their ecosystems. Again, with all of these factors playing into it, that's just how this tends to work. So it's not a particularly great positive impact on the ecosystem, but it is an important factor to include, positive or negative. And then lastly, these are the citations for my slides where I've got a lot of my information from. And yeah, this is the information I have over the red swamp crayfish.